Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Selina, and in today's video we're going to be sewing a House of CB inspired summer dress. I've seen this style of dress all over Pinterest and Instagram. It's been flooding my For You page for several weeks now, so I decided instead of purchasing one, why don't I try to recreate one myself. The pattern is fully self-drafted, and I'll show you a little bit throughout the video on how I did this, as well as the measurements that I used. You'll need 4 meters of fabric and some elastic thread. I used 3 meters, and I would definitely recommend always getting a meter extra to leave room for error. I know a lot of these dresses typically have zippers, however I choose to do a sheared panel in the back with a tie-up component on the top just to make it a bit more adjustable. I also added the tie-up component in the front just to make sure that the bust wouldn't fall down as you were wearing it. I think this dress turned out so pretty, and if you decide to recreate it, I'd love to see the results, so please feel free to tag me on Instagram. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below, but without further ado, let's get sewing. Start by folding your fabric in half, ensuring that one side has a folded edge and the other is open. I have put the formula you will need to find your waist radius on the screen for a half circle skirt. Once you have your waist radius calculated, measure and mark from one corner of your fabric. Don't forget to include seam allowance. Once you have done this, connect the dots with a fashion ruler or freehand. From where we've marked the waist circumference, we're going to measure down the length that you want the skirt to be. As with the first measurements, we're going to mark the fabric and then draw a line. Then cut out along both of the lines that we have drawn. This part is optional, however we will take our tape measure and make a mark on the open sides of the skirt for the length of your slit. Once you have done this, pin the sides together. Now we will sew from the waistline down to the point where we have made a mark for the slit to begin, making sure to do a back stitch at the beginning and end. Press the seams that we have just sewn open. Then, once you get to the slit, fold over the sides by roughly 1 centimeter. Where we have the slit, fold the fabric once again underneath the part that we have just ironed. This will half the seam, and then pin it in place. Don't forget to do this step for both sides. Then sew as close as you can to the outer edge. When you get to the top of the slit, manually move the sewing dial to sew from one side to the other, making sure to backstitch to make it more secure. This part is optional, but I am marking the exact length that I want my skirt to be hemmed just so that it's even all around, but you can eyeball this if you want. I'm going to fold the hem twice to meet my desired hem length and hide the raw bottom. Now sew the hem from one side to the other. Then iron the seam flat. Here is an overview of the pattern pieces you will need for the bodice. I'm just going to speed over how I drafted the patterns with some of my measurements on the screen. If you'd like an in-depth tutorial on this, please let me know. Once we have finished drafting the pattern, we will cut out 2 of each piece. Then iron over all the pieces. Place all of the pieces next to each other, then fold the 2 middle pieces right sides facing together. Pin the pieces in place, then sew them together. Then fold the next piece right sides facing on top of the corresponding piece. Continue to fold the corresponding pieces right sides facing until the bodice is completely sewn together, with the exception of the one piece that will be sheared in the back. This is what the bodice should look like after you have sewn all the pieces together. Now repeat this step with the second pieces that we have cut out. To finish the edges, if you do not have a serger, trim roughly half a centimetre off the raw edge, then zigzag stitch on top. Press the seam flat and towards the back of the bodice with an iron on both sides. On the inside of the breast piece, mark 1.5 centimeters inwards. Align the 2 left breast pieces on top of each other, wrong sides facing, and fold them twice to the mark we made. Pin in place, then sew along the edge. Before we finish off the breast pieces, cut out 2 long strips of fabric which are 60 cm long and 3 cm wide. Iron both pieces flat. Next, mark the middle of the strips, which is 1.5 centimeters. Then fold and iron both sides to meet in the middle. To finish off these strips of fabric, fold the two sides together and press this flat with the iron. Pin this in place, then sew as close to the edge as possible. Along the top of the breast piece, mark 1 centimeter down. Then fold the top once down to the mark we made. Sew the fold in place. Make another mark, this time 3 centimeters from the top of the breast piece. Place one of the straps we sewed inside and fold the top down to the mark we made to ensure there is enough room for the strap to fit. Once you are satisfied, pin the fold in place and then sew over the initial stitches we made. After you've sewn this in place, get one of your straps and use the safety pin to attach to one end, then feed this through the little gap we have created at the top of the breast piece. Ensure that you secure the end of the strap with the end of the breast piece. At the bottom of the breast piece, sew a straight stitch about 1 centimeter away from the bottom. Then gently pull the top thread to gather the fabric. Place the finished breast piece on top of one of the bodice pieces with the wrong side facing upwards. Align and pin the breast piece into the allocated part of the bodice. Repeat this step for the other breast piece as well. Next, place the other bodice piece on top, right sides facing, and pin the top sides together. The breast pieces should stay pinned in between the two bodice pieces. Here's what the bodice looks like once it has been sewn in place. Moving on to the straps, cut out 2 pieces of fabric. For me the measurements were 52 centimeters by 6, but I recommend to try on the bodice first and cut out the length you will need for yourself. Once you have these straps, we will repeat the process we used when making the ties for the breast pieces. Once again, sew them in place and try to get the stitch as close to the edge as possible. I attached the straps to the inside of my bodice right next to the breast piece. Give the bodice and straps a good iron. The shirred panel should be double the length of the gap between the two back pieces that are attached to your bodice and the same height. Once you have the back pieces cut out, place them right sides together and sew along the top. Finish off the raw edge with a serger or zigzag stitch. Fold it right sides out and press the seam flat. This next part is where you will need the elastic thread. You will have to hand wrap the bobbin to ensure it is not too tight or too loose. You can eyeball the distance between each shirred stitch, or you can measure and mark them 1 centimeter away from one another. Then go ahead and sew the shirring until you're roughly 1 centimeter away from the bottom. Once you've finished shirring the back panel, attach this to the back 2 pieces of your bodice, right sides facing. Before you sew this in place, we are going to sew some little loops for the tie-up compartment in the back. You will need 10 pieces of 6 cm by 3 cm strips, and we will finish them the same way we have all the other straps. To attach the loops, put the 2 raw ends together and sandwich them between the shirred panel and one of the back pieces. I placed mine at a distance of 2.5 cm away from each loop. Now sew along the edge to keep everything in place. This is what the back should look like afterwards. At this point I would recommend trying on the top to ensure it fits and seeing where the straps will need to be attached in the back and at what length. For a reference, when starting to attach the skirt and bodice, you can align the front seam of the skirt to the right seam of your bodice. Before we finish off the dress, you will need to cut out a very long strip of fabric. Mine was 121 cm by 3 cm, although I would recommend going a bit longer for the tie-up in the back. Finish the strap the same way we've been doing to the others throughout this video. As always, sew the strap together as close to the edge as possible. Now loop it as evenly as possible through the back panel. Then place the straps on the inside of the bodice, right next to the shirred panel, and sew in place. I sewed in continuation from the first shearing line. Finally, to attach the skirt and bodice, turn the skirt inside out and feed the bodice upside down into the skirt, making sure to align the bottom of the bodice with the top of the skirt. As I mentioned earlier, a good starting point is to align the front right seam with the seam of the skirt so that the slit will flow seamlessly where your leg will be. Then you can begin to pin this in place. When you get to the shearing panel, stretch both the skirt and bodice and pin in place where they stretch. Once you're happy, you can sew everything together and finish the raw edges with your preferred method. Then our project will be complete.